Hey guys, and welcome back to Cape Town Fashion Council's hashtag COVID Reboot series brought to you by the Fashion Council. This series, of course, is geared towards bridging the gap between transformation from the COVID crisis we're experiencing into the future. The Cape Town Fashion, of course, prides itself on being a bridge and a link for the fashion economy, both in the country and in the continent, to do better. Now, today's broadcast is in partnership with Messe Frankfurt, South Africa, and we're zooming in on their Young Designers Competition 2020. Messe Frankfurt, South Africa is excited to announce the rebranding at the ATF Expo and of AT Expo and Source Africa in 2020 to AllFashion Sourcing Cape Town, the premier sourcing event for apparel, textiles, footwear, leather, and lifestyle. The AllFashion Sourcing Cape Town is a business-orientated market. And today we're zooming in on what they are doing at or with this event. Our guest for this afternoon is none other than Nicola Cooper, global trend analyst, and so we are very excited to have Nicola on the show. AllSourcing Cape Town is a business-oriented marketplace combining African creativity, design, and manufacturing with international sourcing options. The fair will be tailored to the needs and realities of South Africa or Southern Africa textile, leather, and fashion industry. Again, we're very excited to have global trend analyst Nicola Cooper as our guest today, who will talk us through Young Designers Competition 2020, trends, silhouettes, and loads more. Let's bring Nicola onto the feed and kick off today's COVID Reboot series. Again, proudly brought to you. So we're bringing in Nicola Cooper, our guest for today's episode onto the show. We see you all joining the feed. Good afternoon and welcome to the episode brought to you by Cape Town Fashion Council. Nicola Cooper, good afternoon and welcome.
Afternoon, how are you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you. It is a privilege to have you on the show, and thank you so much for taking time out to chat to us, Nicola.
Of course, it's always an honor.
There we go again. Cape Town Fashion Council, pioneer or leader in developing or transforming the South African fashion industry or economy. Today, or for this episode, in partnership with AllSourcing, which we'll chat about in a second, this broadcast is brought to you to highlight the Young Designers Competition 2020 and Messe Frankfurt, South Africa. Now, Messe Frankfurt is the third largest eventing company in the world. Firstly, Nicola, we're zooming in on how the event is branding this year and has now become AllSourcing South Africa, AllSourcing Cape Town. But firstly, why is an event like this, an event of this magnitude, important for the fashion economy in South Africa?
Well, I think what it highlights is the potential for manufacturing and introduction to those in the manufacturing game, because I think what we have to understand is there is a strong business component to fashion beyond design. There's a full fashion chain, and I think what it does is introduce sort of young designers and those within the industry to one another to be able to work with people outside of your immediate sort of skill sets.
Now, Nicola, I know you need no introduction, so I'm not going to waste too much time on that. I know you're one of the leading global trend analysts in South Africa. Quickly, before we kick this off, what has Nicola been up to, and what are some of the new and exciting projects and developments that you're working on?
Gosh, I weirdly enough, I've been working more than I usually do, which I'm very fortunate. You know, when I think of those who are sort of in unstable sort of environments, I'm very grateful that, you know, my work is flourishing, as mostly because there's a necessity for businesses and brands to gauge how we're going to handle COVID-19 and the ramifications of that, and still provide really wonderful things to our consumers.
Thank you, Nicola. Again, we follow your work. We appreciate the work you're doing in the South African fashion economy, and no doubt one of the key people to look out for in the industry and to go to for advice. And that's why we're privileged to have you as a guest on today's show. Now, I know that Cape Town Fashion Council has been in partnership with the Young Designers Competition, which is now in its third year. And again, quickly to share this information, allsourcing.za.messefrankfurt.com is where you'll find all the information. Now, they're now calling on fashion graduates to enter the All Fashion Sourcing Young Designers Competition 2020. And you can stand a chance to win a trip to Texville, Paris in February 2021 and the opportunity to showcase your designs on the runway. Other prizes include cash from Cape Town Fashion Council and loads more. And so Nicola Cooper is here today to zoom in on the Young Designers competition, to zoom in on global trends and what is happening within the fashion economy at this point in time. Quickly, Nicola, let's talk about the Young Designers competition. Very exciting. How important is it, and what should young designers be looking out for with this competition?
Well, I think, I've been fortunate enough to be on the panel sort of curating the previous competition. So I gained a lot of insight into, the talent that exists within South Africa and with young designers hoping to go into the industry. For me, the opportunity is incredible. To be able to showcase in Paris is something that, is a dream for most. And I think it's just an incredible opportunity, and also the ideas of, giving cash, giving prizes for young designers starting out, especially now, given sort of the restrictions and the impact it's going to have. So, what is lovely is that, for the next week and a half, here's hoping we get let up next week Friday, is that you've got time to think. And that's what's really why I really wanted to do the live briefing, is to be able to sort of encourage the young designers hoping to enter the competition into spending time and thinking about it, because at the moment that's all we do have is time. So utilizing that to really hone in on their skills, to make sure that they have a solid entry for an incredible opportunity. I think, if that was something that was available to me when I was younger or starting out, I would have gone quite crazy.
Oh, I love that. And I'm hoping that we can inspire young designers and emerging talent to go crazy during this time. What we're doing at the Cape Town Fashion Council is to literally serve as the link or the bridge between the access to resources, access to information, access to key players within the industry, and facilitate the process of growth. Now, Nicola, for young designers looking in, I think it's important that they know what is happening in the global fashion space. And more importantly is understanding key colors and silhouettes and trends, etc., which is, we know you're the best on the market right now when it comes to understanding and forecasting these things. I know that you've prepared quite a bit for young designers, and they can obviously find links to this on your pages, but quickly give us an overview. What are some of the key colors and silhouettes, and then also make up trends that the designers should be focusing on right now?
Well, I mean, obviously on the various websites, we do have the full downloadable report. What I am going to be doing in the next week or so is compiling some Instagram stories with a little bit more insights, so that those interested can come and screen grab them. They'll be living on both Cape Town Fashion Council and my pages. So there's sort of wonderful ways in which they can engage with me beyond just this briefing. But, in essence, I was brought on, by AllFashion Sourcing and Meze Frankfurt and Cape Town Fashion Council, because my area of speciality is the localization of trends. And I think what we're starting to see, and what is a good thing for me, because I've been saying it for a very long time, is that young African designers are getting to create their own sort of inspirations, their own aesthetics, their own fingerprints, and not having to look continuously outside of Africa. And we're starting to recognize our own value and what we bring to the world's table. So
I love that.
I definitely built the trends around that idea, and the trends are really about, exploring what are global trends, but how we can interpret them, and how I'm going to encourage young designers to interpret them for the African summer for 2020. So the idea is, we have a beautiful sort of climate. So these particular trends play on what our consumers value, which is really color, pattern, a sense of escapism. You know, there's a joyous sort of facet to these designs, and it really is, you know, South Africa comes alive during summer. It literally buzzes. So I really want to see how young designers interpret that into a global trend. So we're looking at a global trend. How do we make that category, adapt it and shift it to become something that is completely unique and from a young African's perspective? So the first trend, for those of you who have downloaded the PDF, is entitled Vivid Tropics. So it's really sort of tropicals, abstracts, sort of inspirations from artists such as Matisse. You know, it's bright, it's colorful, sometimes it's flat imagery. So it's really a lovely sort of trend to reinterpret from a South African perspective, and potentially utilizing South African florals into a print or into pattern design. So there's ways in which we can almost localize it from an aesthetic, but play into the tropical trends. Also, when we look at it, you know, Dolce & Gabbana, Versace, MSGM, Valentino, Spring Summer 20 collections, all showcased, you know, these beautiful, bold, tropical patterns and prints and colors that they can pull reference from and pull inspiration from. You know, it's bright, it's graphics, it's kind of chaotic, it's really loud and vivacious like we are as South Africans. So there's really a wonderful way to incorporate that into our design by looking at our own personalities and how we come alive for spring summer 2020 and 2021. But one of the things I am going to highlight is particular color, which is Pantone. It's lime zest. So you know, that sort of bordering on neon, the neon colors that we can incorporate, that we've seen sort of Kim Kardashian incorporating neons and neutrals. So there's ways in which this really strong, bold color can be interpreted into this particular trend, but also can be interpreted with a muted palette for those who are not comfortable designing in that space. So there is a lot of sort of spaces in which to explore, not just from where the trend comes from, but how you can incorporate that into your unique aesthetic. You know, there's no, I would hesitate to encourage people to replicate. I would rather you pull and you create and align something that is with you as a designer, that fits with you and your fingerprints.
I love that.
Because it has to be authentic. The second one I incorporated was homemade geos or geometry. That is something that, you know, completely is quite a natural trend for African and South African pattern design. It's, you know, how you can create something that is handmade. So it's handcrafted prints and textures, and how we can utilize those things that are natural aesthetic from us as African designers and those involved in African aesthetics. So, you know, when you look at blocking or twisted lines or homemade zigzags, printed checks, there's ways in which you can get quite creative with it. You know, a lot of designers in South Africa battle to find printed fabrics, because there is a sort of limited resource to fabrication. This one really, this particular trend encourages you to create it yourself and hand create it. So there's a lovely sort of innocence, there's a lovely naivety, there's a lovely sort of craft aspect to it. But then how do you sort of align that craft aspect, which is so sort of natural for South Africans, into a high-end kind of clothing design into a contemporary. So it's really a way that you can combine something that is kind of juxtapositional and create something completely unique for that. So some of the designers playing into that this season, the Christian Dior, Spring Summer 2020, Oscar de la Renta, Spring Summer 2020, Balmain, Spring Summer 2020. So if you go and actively look at that, you can see how those global designers have actually pulled inspiration from Africa. So, you know, I've been really firm in saying, you know, if we don't recognize our own value, someone else will. So now is the time for us to claim that flag and to create things that are a nod to our cultures, are a nod to our ancestors, you know, in all those facets, because there is great value in who we are as South Africans and those creating within the South African landscape, that there's stuff that makes us completely unique to the rest of the world. So I'm going to encourage the young designers to incorporate those facets that give them a critical point of differentiation and an aesthetic richness that only exists here, you know, and embrace the value of that. So there is a particular sort of color trend around this kind of aesthetic. You know, I've kind of introduced it as the new nudes, which is really around the romanticism of the safari, the sexy skims or body tight latex by Kim Kardashian, those very neutral tones that you can incorporate within this trend if you do not want to sort of go towards the geometric or patterns. There are ways in which you can incorporate this. It's almost a throwback to the Out of Africa, the Yves Saint Laurent from the 1970s. There's a little bit of a hippie-esque, bohemian sort of aspect to it. But it really is, you know, utilizing animal print or strong color accents with it, or completely stripping it down into these beautiful sandy, bleached sand tones and stones that could be in alignment with the overarching trend but doesn't subscribe to the pattern rich. So if you are more of a minimalistic designer and prefer solid colors, then there's a way in which you can tap into that trend from a visual perspective. The other one and the last one that I've sort of given the young designers to play around with, again, it is around sort of ink and paint and creativeness. This is around artistic florals, brushed florals, pastels, sort of impressionist flowers. If you think about, you know, sort of the vintage pressed flowers, if you think about fynbos, if you think about those beautiful subdued sort of pastel tones that you can pull inspiration from. I mean, Cape Town has the most beautiful sort of wildflowers. You know, if you look at the landscapes in South Africa, fields filled with cosmos, those kinds of color palettes are so supremely rich and so aligned to our cultural from a visual aesthetic, but also aligns to a more larger global trend, which is these kinds of mixes of florals, these delicate floral patterns, from kind of watercolors to dried kind of floral arrangements to, you know, natural backgrounds to exaggerated floral prints. But some of the key designers utilizing these trends are Blue Marine, Spring Summer 2020, Anna Sui, Spring Summer 2020, and Lela Rose, Spring Summer 2020. So what you'll see when it comes to these kinds of aesthetics, that it is really romantic, and the sort of shapes and the silhouettes are flowy. You know, there's those light chiffons. It's, you know, really beautiful and sort of skims the surfaces, silks, you know, sort of extravagant fabrics that are light on the body for spring, summer, allows your body to breathe, you know, so you can pull in more natural fabrics. You know, those kinds of things are really important when you're looking at specifically designing for spring summer, when you know our climates are, you know, in the 30s, and you know, our consumers need to feel like they're floating on air and that they're really almost wearing nothing. So the idea is to get these sort of beautiful flowing elements that give a sense of romanticism, and obviously paired with these florals, give it a very sort of vintage, sort of angelic, you know, that sort of idea of innocence, that is just so beautiful and ethereal. So one of the key colors for this is Pantone's Dawn Pink. So it really is, you know, it's an evolution from the pink trend that we've seen over the past year. It's going more towards a kind of lavender, dirty pink space. So in that respect, this particular color also lends itself to more gender neutral. So being able to translate, instead of the sort of pinks that we've been seeing, there is a little bit more of a masculine undertone to this. So when you look at it, there is an ability to translate this into suiting or jackets or streetwear for men, that plays into that pink sort of hue without being overtly effeminate. But there is ways in which designers who prefer to design gender neutral to incorporate a color that can sell across categories. It's a very versatile color, as are the ones before, but really you can use, even though it is a lavender pink, you can utilize it when you are arming it with a more sort of masculine silhouette. So there's ways in which you can even incorporate that sort of high trend color to a male product line. Yeah. So when we're looking at it, I mean, if you look historically, it really is around, you know, the Laura Ashleys, the kind of romanticism that we've been seeing. There's ways in which, you know, the details such as the puffy sleeves come into that aspect. You know, these ideas of ties and ribbons, it could be fully embellished if you think about pearls and those kinds of accents, those kinds of details, hand embroidery. So there's a lot of beautiful ways that you can articulate this highly romantic sort of trend for spring summer. So I've tried to sort of align, you know, three very, very diverse trends, because I do believe that, you know, trends are not. One of the designer's consumer typologies in their own mind might not like bold pattern and strong color. So I've really tried to diversify the trends so that there's a little bit for everyone and a little bit for every consumer, so that, you know, if you have someone that is targeting a more effeminate female consumer, that there is something for them to utilize. But then, you know, there is aspects of bold colors or neutrals and patterns and shapes for those who have more fashion forward, you know, who are not so sort of conservative or reserved. So I've tried to incorporate sort of a little bit of everything for everyone.
Of course, I love it. So we're going to call that our overview of the three biggest categories when it comes to silhouettes or trends. And again, you can get a full picture, or fashion designers or the industry, in fact, can get a full picture of these trends via a visual story template that will be found on Nicola's Insta stories, as well as Cape Town Fashion Council's Insta stories. So the industry can literally just go onto your stories or be in the highlight section, and they can screen grab templates of these trends. Am I correct in saying that? I'm giving them permission.
Yes, I am in the process of creating a little bit of a Instagram story that's going to live on my highlights in my personal Instagram. So those who don't follow me, it's at Nicola Cooper. But of course, Cape Town Fashion Council will also be sharing that information. But already Cape Town Fashion Council has got the brief with the three trends and the breakdowns and the colors that you can tap into now. Go download them, And then I think from Monday next week, they will be available on Cape Town Fashion Council's stories and my stories. And there will be a little bit more information there because I've got into sort of makeup trends that could align to it. Because at the end of the day, the winners or those going on into the finals will have to present it and style it. So I'm trying to give them as much of a full picture as possible.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing that insight, Nicola Cooper. I think it's very important, and I love that this year the Messe Frankfurt and All Source in Cape Town has brought a local voice in terms of who understands global trends onto this platform, as opposed to getting this advice or insight from someone international. I think having someone from the African soil share these insight and trends with us is of utmost importance. And so thank you for coming on board. I want to do this quickly, just go through 3 comments. Paul Pipes says, I love Nicola. Gilmore
I love you too, Paul.
Gilmore T says, I love me, some Nicola, so everybody's loving. And then we've got a question, Nicola, before we proceed. Do we have to submit computer-generated illustrations, or can it be hand sketched? And that's from Toby Cooper.
Yes, they can be hand sketched. I mean, we know that not everyone has access to a computer, so it is a case of generating it by hand and potentially scanning it in, or taking a photo with your phone. But you can get sort of all the delivery details and all those specs from Cape Town Fashion Council.